Before we begin, I'd like to thank the Bone Fossil Research Project and Helix as sponsors of my cause. They've worked endlessly on my research, and we began to develop a relationship that can only be described as mutually understanding. Again, thank you for your contributions, as this would not be possible without them.
My name is Gorgio. I studied at the University of Geragelus in 1986 and gained my master's in bionuclear fusion and genocidal engineering reform. I also have a bachelor's in biochemistry with a concentration in lipids of chitro, and am currently a professor at the University of Geragelus, teaching the sciences of group alcoholism. In 2008, I held a study in collaboration with Professor of Depressive Studies, Dr. Matthias Jewell at Johnson State University.
A survey was run on a sorted American student body of 150,000 so who described themselves as trauma survivors. When submitting to the study, after a survey, students were asked to briefly describe their trauma. Descriptions ranged from physical abuse, medical malpractice, and exposure to blood.
One student described having a mix of condiments, powders, and human excrete dumped onto them while comatose, and only finding out 3 years after it happened. I have the photo of that here. For those of you that are curious, take a look. Pass there.
We also ran the exact same survey on students who described themselves as never having gone through any trauma. With the help of a student who wishes to remain anonymous, we developed a program that would sift through all submitted traumatic and non-traumatic conscious experiences and separate those that apply to our hypothesis. We termed this method trauma screening. Our findings showed that 100% of the participants who had undergone trauma experienced a heightened conscious level and viewed life through a more existential lens compared to those who hadn't. They contemplate decisions more deeply, often feel alienated when interacting with the general public, and are frequently reminded of their traumatic experiences on a day-to-day basis, which only serves to increase doubt and uncertainty in their own conscious experience. So this ultimately leads to the existential dread that was commonly observed in our study. So trauma survivors are those with a heightened conscious level, widely do everything to disregard the benefit they serve to humanity. Or at least, disregard them due to the lingering existential dread. I hesitate to pinpoint a single reason as an example as to how badly humans have altered their profession. In my opinion, it's impossible to refer to one problem without referring to another thousand. Hubert Fleisch, who has a PhD in human progression and failure, has referred to humans as the least conscious animals on Earth. Quoting him directly, "We search for meaning in what we have made, which in itself is flawed. Because what we have made serves as a bias to our own importance. And even if we've convinced ourselves that it isn't us, but a God that gives us meaning, no God exists without our acknowledgement. And the second we acknowledge it, we again serve to excuse our own biases in something greater than ourselves." End quote. See, your making serve to comfort your life, even at the expense of other humans. See, most people aren't conscious of this, but trauma survivors are, as they are direct victims of this mentality. And by comfort, I don't refer to the opposite of discomfort, as discomfort is a natural part of the human experience and is ultimately needed and must exist in order for a society to thrive. No, when I refer to comfort, I refer to convenience. It's convenient to say you have trauma, regardless of whether it's true or not. As I said, trauma survivors are just as much victims of this mentality as they are wimps for failing to stand against it. After all, why would they? It's easier to make excuses relating to one's instability and gain societal leverage, even if the crowd's reactions are often superficial, since most people aren't nearly as empathetic as they'd like to believe and wouldn't admit it even if they were asked. To prove this, I'd like to refer back to my survey.
What I left out at the beginning of my seminar was that the survey we created for our study would procedurally regenerate and alter questions based on the traumatic experiences submitted by the participating students.
In both cases, students would prioritize their own trauma or lack thereof over the other experiences submitted by students. Regardless of how intense or severe the trauma was, we found that 87% of students would prioritize their own experiences, whether traumatic or not, over those on the survey. Of course, we did not disclose that these experiences were real, but we did ask for the participating students to consider them as such. And I'll be the first to admit that I personally don't care what you've gone through, but I will acknowledge the fact that because of your experiences, you may offer a greater, more knowledgeable perspective than most, and because of that, I won't dispose of you. I'm sorry if I'm being abrupt, but this was never supposed to be a sympathetic woo-hoo about trauma survivors. This is about how trauma can serve a purpose, even if unintentional and harmful to the victim. It's not easy to have a conversation like this for humans, rest assured, I know that. But a higher conscious experience cannot be ignored and must be harnessed for the better of humanity. And if the downfall of humanity was due to your love for convenience, then what better to do than listen to people who are more aware of it? You aren't able to currently do this, though. To begin the integration of the traumatized for the benefit of your society, you must change your kid thinking. The traumatized, if social media would vouch otherwise, are seen as weak. But they're only seen as weak because they are told that their experiences serve no purpose, other than to make their life, like a living hell. Many would also vouch that no amount of therapy can help the traumatized. So it's completely juvenile to think that your Instagram post will porn. Sorry to say that your internet affirmations are just another form of convenience. Trauma's potential to reform the way humans live life is untapped. It's about time we recognize it, and despite the severe danger it imposes on people, it's going to keep happening. And since it's going to keep happening, we should be more aware of it and acknowledge it and learn how it affects a conscious experience negatively and positively. Thank you.